With the NFL draft officially over, I know a lot of you guys would be very interested in seeing my final post-draft marker update for all 4 positions. And then at the end of the video, I'll even share my top 24 Superflex and 1 quarterback rankings for your rookie draft. So without further ado, let's just get right into the spreadsheets, and we'll start at the quarterback position. And again, let me just remind you that we are talking through my marker system for all 4 positions, and my markers are essentially just baselines that previously successful NFL players had coming out of college that I want my prospects to also hit on those same baselines. It's just basically a compilation or a summation of 14 to 17 markers depending on the position, and if that's essentially what we have going on. That's how I'm grading all of these prospects. So for the 2025 quarterback class, obviously it is highlighted, of course, by Cam Ward, and I am sorting this by the adjusted markers. That is how I sort it, which is a final draft capital adjustment based on first, second, third, all that kind of draft capital based on their round of all of these prospects. So when you see each of these classes on this page being sorted, it is being sorted by this adjusted marker column here in column R. So like I said, at the very top, Cam Ward coming in with 17 adjusted markers. Now, the maximum that you could possibly have as a quarterback prospect is 20 adjusted markers. He's coming in at 17, which is actually tied for the second highest all time. No quarterback has more than 18 adjusted markers hit. And you can actually see Caleb Williams was the most recent prospect that hit on 18 adjusted markers. Cam Ward, not too far behind him at 17. So technically, if you're just going by this, he would be ahead of Jaden Daniels, Bo Nix, Drake May, and JJ McCarthy, and Michael Penix as technically the QB2 graded in last year's class. I think personally, a lot of my rankings are more subjective. I don't go off of just what my model is saying. So I probably would have had Jaden Daniels ahead of Cam Ward, especially with the landing spot and everything, and with the rushing upside that Jaden Daniels has. But I want to point that out as a way of saying that Cam Ward is a better prospect than I think a lot of people want to give him credit for. I've been on that train for quite a few months now that I think a lot of people just don't really view Cam Ward as a really, kind of good to even elite prospect. And I don't want to say he's elite, but I think he's definitely a lot better than what people give him credit for. If you're just using this modeling system, he would have been the QB2 in 2024. He would have been ahead of both Bryce Young and CJ Stroud in 2023. Obviously, 2022 isn't even a quarterback class at all. He would have been the QB2 in 2021 behind just Trevor Lawrence, another quarterback who had 18 markers hit as tied for the most overall with Caleb. He would have been right there with Joe Burrow, right there with Tua in 2020, ahead of Justin Herbert, Jalen Hurts, and Jordan Love. He would have been technically ahead of Kyler Murray, although I think I would have given Kyler the same benefit I would have given Jaden Daniels because of the rushing upside. And then he would have been the QB2 in 2018, ahead of Darnold and Josh Allen and Lamar. So that is essentially just showing you that he is probably like a top 5 quarterback just over the last 7 or 8 years of quarterback prospects. And I want to draft him as a top 3 player in my Superflex leagues. And especially if you're in an actual 2 quarterback league, not Superflex, but legitimately starting 2 quarterbacks every single week, I think that there's a very solid argument for him to potentially be the 1.01, if not for sure the 1.02 in specifically 2 quarterback leagues. Superflex, I can give you some leeway, and I would put Amari Hampton ahead of Cam Ward at the 1.02. But then Ward at the 1.03 ahead of all the other wide receivers and running backs and tight ends. Moving on down the list, the QB2 obviously is Jackson Dart, the only other quarterback that was drafted in the first round. And he's coming in with 12 adjusted markers. So he's a pretty solid prospect. I mean, if you were just comparing to last year, that's ahead of JJ McCarthy. That's ahead of Michael Penix. That is ahead of everybody in 2022. Obviously, that's in like the Trey Lance range for 2021, which would have been behind Zach Wilson and Justin Fields. And it's around that Justin Herbert range in 2020 ahead of Jalen Hurts and Jordan Love. So I really like Jackson Dart, and I know that I've seen a lot of people saying that he might even redshirt this year. I highly doubt that. I honestly think that Jackson Dart is going to start 12 or more games this year. Brian Dable is on one of the hottest of hot seats for NFL coaches this year, and they traded up to go get Jackson Dart, and I think that they need to win. Dable himself needs to win. If Russell Wilson starts the year 1-3, they're going to be throwing Jackson Dart out there. And the New York media is for sure going to be calling for Jackson Dart to be thrown out there because why would they turn to Jameis Winston? They already know what Jameis can be. He's probably not going to help them win any more games. Dart, their first round rookie that they traded back into the first round for, could actually help them win games. That's the whole reason why they even drafted him in the first round. I think Jackson Dart, I wouldn't be shocked if he is a starter by the end of September, but I bet you he's in by at least mid to late October at the latest and plays a majority of the games in 2025. And then that just carries over into being the full-time starter in 2026. So I like Jackson Dart a lot. I think that he's a very good like mid to late first round pick. I can definitely understand, especially when you get down later in rookie drafts and you actually own those picks yourselves. Like you were a playoff team that maybe you went to the semifinals, maybe even the championship. Jackson Dart's on the board. You might not even need a quarterback. I understand why you might pass on Jackson Dart there for running backs or wide receivers or tight ends because it's not necessarily what your team needs. But I also think that you could just take Jackson Dart kind of out of luxury, see what happens. Maybe he does over exceed expectations a la Bo Nix last year, and you have a player that is a bona fide top 15 Dynasty quarterback, maybe even a closer to top 12 Dynasty quarterback, depending on how well he performs. Because, he is throwing him elite neighbors. That is most definitely going to help him. And then if the Giants continue to draft more help for him in 2026 or add free agents next year, and just continue to build around Jackson Dart, that is a benefit for him and will help to raise his dynasty value as well. So I really like Jackson Dart as a mid to late first round pick. Anywhere basically once we get to like the 108 to the 112, I think that's a perfect range for Jackson Dart, depending on your own personal need. But then also if you just want a good player that is going to maintain value heading into 2026. Now, as for the rest of the quarterback class, I know a lot of people have been really in on like Tyler Shuck and stuff. And he does grade out as the QB5 with that second round draft capital. I honestly just do not care at all about Tyler Shuck. I know that he got drafted by the Saints and, he might be a starter at some point this year, especially with Derek Carr's injury and blah, blah, blah. I just don't think Tyler Shuck is good at all. I think he's a worse version of Kenny Pickett. I didn't like Kenny Pickett at all, especially as a Steelers fan. I hated that pick. I think Tyler Shuck is even worse than that, and I just don't want anything to do with him. I do think that I have him as like the 3.01 in my Superflex rankings. I don't want Tyler Shuck. I think he's bad. I would much rather take the shot on Jalen Milroe, who actually I think has, has similar or even decent odds as Tyler Shuck of being a starter at some point over the next 2 years for the Seattle Seahawks, just like Shuck might be with the New Orleans Saints. Maybe, both those teams go with, their veterans in Carr and Darnold for 2025, but then maybe things start to shift a little bit, and now we get Tyler Shuck thrown in there, we get Jalen Milroe thrown in there. Milroe's ceiling for fantasy is so much higher for fantasy football. He's literally just Justin Fields. Tyler Shuck, I think, is just bad, and I don't really care for him at all. I'd much rather take the shot on Jalen Milroe, even at similar cost, but you can get Jalen Milroe probably cheaper because he was a third round pick. People probably aren't expecting him to actually get as much playing time or even really any playing time behind Sam Darnold, but I wouldn't put it past the Seahawks to try to do something, especially if Darnold is not as good as he was in Minnesota, which I think is very likely. If he's not thrown to Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison, he's not in the Kevin O'Connell system. He's in a worse offensive system, thrown to worse wide receivers as a whole, and behind a pretty bad offensive line, or at least a worse offensive line than Minnesota. I would not be shocked if Sam Darnold came crashing back down to earth, and now we're wondering if Jalen Milroe is going to get thrown in and have a shot to be a starter for the pure upside that he possesses. And if that happens for fantasy football, he's probably an immediate top 15, if not even top 12 fantasy quarterback in the weeks that he plays just because of the rushing upside that he possesses. So I would much rather, if you're in the third round and you're looking for a quarterback dart throw to throw, take Jalen Milroe, or even better yet, just take Shedeur Sanders or Will Howard or even Dylan Gabriel, who grades out as a QB3 in this class. Like, just take one of those other guys rather than Tyler Shuck, because I would not be surprised if Dylan Gabriel got opportunities to start for Cleveland, if Shedeur got opportunities to start for Cleveland, and maybe he's got a chip on his shoulder, is actually maybe not as good as everybody thought, but is actually better than, obviously his fifth round draft capital. And he's thrown to, Jerry Jeudy and David Njoku, now Harold Fannin. He's got Quinshon Judkins and Dylan Sampson in the backfield. Like, it could be a new team for the Cleveland Browns. And if you're taking the shot on Gabriel or Shador, don't necessarily disagree on either one of those. I just want Will Howard for the Steelers. Might get an opportunity to start this year too. I think he's better than Mason Rudolph. So, take all those guys at cheaper values than Tyler Shuck. That's essentially where I'm at with this quarterback class. If you're not getting one of the two guys in the first round, then just wait and take a higher upside quarterback if you really wanted to take the shot on one of those guys. So before I move on to running backs and wide receivers, I did just want to briefly go through the tight end position, just because it is another position that just kind of has a few guys that we can run through pretty quickly before we dive into the other two positions a lot deeper. Obviously, at the top of the list, Colston Loveland, Tyler Warren, tight end 1 and tight end 2. No surprises there whatsoever. My modeling system does slightly prefer Colston Loveland to Tyler Warren. That's not necessarily just because he was drafted first or anything like that. He just hit on one more marker than Tyler Warren did, and neither one of them even tested as well. So they could technically be a little bit higher than where they ultimately graded out just historically if they had both tested, but they still are grading out as very, very, very good prospects. My modeling system just prefers Loveland. I prefer Loveland a little bit more just because he is 2 years younger than Tyler Warren, so he has a little bit longer of a shelf life and, could be doing... Honestly, I think Colston Loveland could be in a better situation in terms of a better offense, and I think is just a better receiving talent than Tyler Warren himself for fantasy football. That is obviously better. But those two are fantastic. We can talk about their landing spots and all that kind of stuff just in terms of will they produce in 2025? If they don't, then how much longer are we going to wait for them to produce? Blah, 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 blah. I'm willing to just trust into the talent of both of these guys. Loveland specifically, with the fact that they drafted Luther Burden, I'm just willing to trust into the talent of Colston Loveland. I'll trust into Ben Johnson, all that kind of situation, because, like one or two of those guys on the Bears right now are probably going to get kind of pushed out. Caleb is not going to be able to support all of these guys, but who's to say that, DJ Moore isn't gone in a year or two, or Loveland just gets a really good opportunity because he's a tight end and he's not competing technically at the same position with the other guys. So he's going to be on the field, 100% of the time. He just has to beat out Cole Kmet. And then he only has to compete with the other wide receivers that are on the field. He's not competing with the other wide receivers for snaps even, because he's going to be on the field a whole heck of a lot. And just the fact that it is the tight end position, if he and Luther Burden have the exact same stat line, say they have 800 yards, 5 touchdowns on 70 receptions. That is the same stat line that they both have behind Rome Odunze and DJ Moore, who both have 1,000-yard seasons. Obviously, this is a super high ultimate ceiling upside for all of the Bears offense and for Caleb Williams himself. But if Loveland and Burden have the same exact stats, that's more impactful for Colston Loveland at the tight end position. 70 for 805 is a top 7 or 8 fantasy tight end, whereas 70 for 805 is like the wide receiver 40-something in fantasy football. So that's why I'm really in on Colston Loveland, not to mention the fact that they drafted him first. Ben Johnson was really excited for him. If you listen to the phone call with him when they drafted Colston Loveland, when he called Loveland, he just seemed very excited for him. So I'm still in on the talent of Colston Loveland as a fringe first-round pick in rookie drafts. Same thing with Tyler Warren as a fringe first-round pick. They need to figure out the quarterback situation, but if he's as good as advertised, he is very clearly better than basically a whole heck of a lot of what Indianapolis has. He might even be better than Josh Downs, might even be better than Michael Pittman in terms of being a reliable, friendly target for Anthony Richardson or Daniel Jones. He might be the most impactful fantasy football player on the Indianapolis Colts, because again, it's at the tight end position. If he and Josh Downs have the same stat line, that is way better for the tight end position than it is for the wide receiver position. Or if Josh Downs is their one, Warren and Pittman have the same stat line, way more impactful for Tyler Warren at the tight end position for fantasy football. So another guy, fringe first-round pick for me, that I would just trust into the talent and hope the situation gets better as we move forward into 2026 and 2027. Might have to wait a little bit, but I think he's going to hold value, and I think that's going to be completely fine. Now, as for the rest of the tight ends, obviously Mason Taylor, Terrence Ferguson, Elijah Arroyo, they all went off the board pretty much in succession in the mid to late second round. It was in that order too in terms of Taylor, Ferguson, Arroyo. That is the order that I would also prefer them in. I think Mason Taylor has the most open landing spot of the three of them. Obviously, I don't love the fact that he's getting tossed the ball to by Justin Fields, because I don't think Fields is a good quarterback to support fantasy weapons, but he is probably going to be the second option on the Jets. Obviously the starting tight end. So there's an opportunity there for him to be kind of like what Cole Kmet was with Justin Fields just a couple years ago. So I like drafting him as like a mid-second, essentially. Terrence Ferguson, I think, is a late second. Elijah Arroyo, late second. Ferguson, obviously, is going to be stuck behind Puka and Devontae Adams. I couldn't think of his name. But I think there's opportunity there. Sean McVay was hyping him up. He's a very athletic guy. If he can be a safety blanket for Matthew Stafford, who we know can be a very prolific passer, and has supported multiple weapons at the same time. Not to mention Puka has been known to have some injury history last year and the year before, even in college. Devontae Adams got hurt last year, also getting up there a little bit in age too. May not even be on the team in 2026, or at least not contractually on the team in 2027. So there's an avenue for Terrence Ferguson to produce in 2025 and then to continue to grow in that role. I like drafting him as a fringe second or third round pick as well. Elijah Arroyo in Seattle, I think is pretty solid. He's basically just Noah Fant. I don't really know if that means all that much because Noah Fant wasn't all that impactful. I think Sam Darnold is a downgrade from Geno Smith. He's just going to kind of be there, so he's fine. I think he's maybe an early third, but that's essentially where I'm at with him. Harold Fannin is interesting with the Cleveland Browns. David Njoku is a free agent, I believe, after this year. So maybe he grows into that kind of David Njoku tight end one, obviously high volume pass catcher role that Njoku has been and that Fannin was in college. I like the shot on him. I honestly like Fannin more than I do Elijah Arroyo, and he might honestly have the more upside than Mason Taylor and Terrence Ferguson just in general. My market system certainly believes so. He's still the tight end 3 in this class, even with worse draft capital than all 3 of those other guys. So I'm willing to take the shot on Fannin, another guy that's probably going to end up being a third-round pick for you in your rookie drafts. I'm willing to take the shot on him if you want to go for a tight end. The one guy, though, that we need to talk about, and if you are a fan of this channel, you've watched these videos before, you've watched some of my sleeper videos as well before the NFL draft, Oronde Gadsden, 5th-round pick, but he went to the LA Chargers, man. That is such an open landing spot for a tight end like Oronde Gadsden to go into as the tight end 1 on that team. And he's a receiver. I mean, he started as a receiver at Syracuse, transitioned over to a tight end position, had uber production, over 900 yards in 2 seasons, minus the 1 season that he got hurt, then minus his freshman season when he wasn't all that involved. But the 2 seasons that he played essentially a full repertoire of games, he was over 900 yards, 7 or 8 touchdowns in all those seasons at Syracuse. And I think that he's Darren Waller. That's essentially my comp for him, is that he could do Darren Waller things. And Darren Waller was, I think, a 6th-round pick, actually. So Gadsden has the opportunity to be the tight end 1 in a Justin Herbert-led offense. He could be has an opportunity to maybe even be the 3rd target on that team, maybe the 4th behind Amari and Hampton. But you got Ladd, you got Trey Harris now. Hampton out of the backfield. I don't know if he's going to get as many passes thrown to him just in this Harbaugh-Roman offense. But Gadsden, I mean, I think that there is an opportunity here, and I don't see a lot of people talking about him at all. I don't even know if he's going to be drafted in your rookie drafts. He is like an amazing 4th-round pick to me, that if you get to the late 4th, or even if he goes undrafted and you can pick him up off of waiver wires, Oronde Gadsden is one of the best rookie picks that you can make deep in your rookie drafts, in my opinion. He's one of 2 guys. The other guy we'll get to in a minute. At the wide receiver position, but I am all in on targeting Oronde Gadsden for the upside that he has as the starting tight end for the LA Chargers and for Justin Herbert. You want to know what some of these kind of colors on these cells are. So first of all, he's colored in my marker system, which you're only colored that way if you get over 10 or more markers hit, which if you want to filter that down into the tight ends that have hit this range, we got Gadsden is the only one in this class that has 10 or more actual markers hit. Ben Sinnott, Michael Mayer, Trey McBride, Greg Dulcich, Kyle Pitts, Hunter Long, TJ Hawkinson, Sternberger, Caleb Wilson, hate to see it, Andrews, Ingram, Darren Waller is right in there, again, as a 6th-round pick, Ebron, Eifert, Kelsey, Gronk, Pitta, Vernon Davis, Dallas Clark. Bowers would have been on this list, and as I'd imagine, Loveland and Warren would have also had they actually tested. But just in general, for the type of production and athleticism that he has coming out of college, he puts himself in a very, very interesting spot historically with a lot of other really, really good tight ends. The other thing that he gets colored on, if you're colored blue on my PFF markers, so that's a different marker system that is looking at just PFF metrics like yards per route run, targets per route run, first downs per route run, all that kind of stuff. If you are drafted between rounds 1 through 5, and you have 7 or more markers hit, you get this color as well. You want to be looking at some of the names that are in here over the past few draft classes. Warren, Fannin, Gadsden are the 3 names from this class. You got Brock Bowers and Eric All from last year. Kincaid, Laporta, McBride, Likely, Pitts, Hunter Long, Brevin Jordan, Harrison Bryant, Alberto, Caden Smith. That got dicey pretty quickly. But then we get back to Andrews, Ingram, Njoku, Gerald Everett, George Kittle, and then Max Williams and Clyde Walford. So obviously no list is going to have a 100% hit rate. There are busts all over the place, but I mean, for the cost that it takes to acquire Oronde Gadsden in terms of a random 4th round rookie pick, or even not at all, if you do 5 rounds in your rookie draft, I wouldn't even doubt that he'd be there in your 5th round because nobody is talking about him. But he has positioned himself, like I said, in a very interesting set of lists in both Pro Football Focus metrics and my marker system. And he's got the LA Chargers potential tight end 1 situation locked up. I am so interested in Oronde Gadsden. And that's where I'm going to end it because I talked about him for way too long. All right, on to the running back position. And again, this is where we're looking at the adjusted markers is column R. Now, you will notice that if you looked at this, you would see that Omarion Hampton is graded above Ashton Genty. The only reason that is the case is because Ashton Genty did not test and Omarion Hampton did. So I am missing 3 markers from Ashton Genty in terms of 40 time, speed score, and burst score. I'd imagine he would have hit on all 3 fairly easily. So if we give him credit for those 3, he would be hitting on 12 markers before the NFL draft, or after the NFL draft, he would hit on 12 markers, and he would be up to 15 adjusted markers as the RB1 in this class. And if you're curious on other running backs that have hit on 15 markers, there's not many. It's just Bijan and Travis Etienne, and Ashton Genty probably would have also done it as well. So that is the list that we're looking at. Both of those guys, or at least Etienne has had multiple RB1 seasons. Bijan is well on his way to multiple RB1 seasons. Might even honestly be there. I can't remember if he was an RB1 as a rookie or not, but he was for sure last year. So that's the company that Ashton Genty's in. Omarion Hampton was at 14 adjusted markers hit. So if you're curious on the list that puts him on, Saquon, Christian McCaffrey, Marshawn Lynch, D'Angelo Williams, Steven Jackson, LaDainian Tomlinson. I mean, that's Omarion Hampton. He's got the Harbaugh Roman offense as a run-first offense that, was phenomenal for Frank Gore. Harbaugh's offense obviously was phenomenal in college for multiple running backs that now we don't even necessarily care about. And Roman obviously continued to do great things with the Baltimore Ravens. I mean, it's just perfect for Omarion Hampton. I see a lot of people, I'm not saying that they're trying to be contrarian. I definitely am trying to understand why that there are some film analysts that see some maybe not knocks, but they see some yellow flags in Hampton's running style and just his film in general, that they are a little bit concerned about him. But I mean, from my analytical process here, I mean, this speaks for itself, in my opinion, as to why Omarion Hampton is the easy RB2 in this class, in a tier of his own behind Ashton Genty, is my 1.2 in all formats, unless there's that alt format, like I said, where maybe it's strictly 2 QB, or it's 14 or 16 team super flex to where quarterbacks are even more highly valued. IDP leagues, you might get Travis Hunter thrown up in there too. But Omarion Hampton, man, I think just going to be so freaking good. So if you want to look at the list of 14 and 15 markers, adjusted markers hit after draft capital, this is the list that Genty and Omarion Hampton have found themselves on, essentially. It is a phenomenal list. Not really sure I need to talk all that much more about it. The rest of this class, though, is where some of these things start to get interesting. So I mentioned in my running back rankings video that RJ Harvey does grade out as my RB3 in this class. And he had hit on 9 markers, then gets second round draft capital. So he got he had 8 markers before the draft. Second round draft capital gave him 9 because in order to get my draft capital marker, you need to be a first or second round pick. So he hit that, got that draft capital that we weren't necessarily expecting, but he got it. And he's finishing at 10 adjusted markers, which if you're looking at historically, I'll just click on, these are guys that have 10 or 11 adjusted markers hit. We're looking at, RJ Harvey's in there, Jahmyr Gibbs, Charbonnet's in there, but he kind of got killed because he went to a team that already had Kenneth Walker, so I give that a pass a little bit. Javante's in there. Of course, AJ Dillon's in here, and CEH. I think those are the two names that you can really point to say, hey, this might not necessarily work out for RJ Harvey because those two guys probably got overdrafted. But if you're still in the pro RJ Harvey list, you got DeAndre Swift, J.K. Dobbins just kind of got killed by an injury, Nick Chubb, Derrick Henry, Melvin Gordon, Le'Veon Bell, Doug Martin, the Ray Rice is down here, Maurice Jones-Drew. Like, these are some phenomenal names to also be in here. It does get a little bit less of a 100% hit rate like it did for, like the list was for Genty and Amari and Hampton, obviously, but there are still some phenomenal names on this list to comp RJ Harvey to. And I think that he's, when you compare the fact that he is Sean Payton's running back now, their clear need at the running back position, he's probably their RB1. I understand why people would be be very high on him. And I've also seen a lot of people say that they're still hesitant about RJ Harvey, that he's not even a first-round pick in rookie drafts. He's a first-round pick for me. I believe I have him at 109, 110. I can't remember the exact number. He's in that range, essentially, and the fourth tier for me at the running back position as my RB6. So I still prefer Judkins, Henderson, and Caleb to him, and obviously the top two. But then Harvey is a top 6 running back for me, and then he is a massive tier break after that. So it really is just, do you trust into the draft capital and landing spot and situation that he went to, or are you concerned about the meteoric rise of RJ Harvey to where he was being thought of prior to the draft, that now you might be a little bit hesitant because we've also seen that story, and that story has sometimes gone negatively, i.e. Clyde Edwards-Helaire. But that's not to say that RJ Harvey isn't a bad running back. I mean, he's phenomenal in this marker system. And I will say, to RJ Harvey's credit, when I'm comparing him to Clyde Edwards-Helaire, the draft capital adjustment at the end really shined a light on CEH as it probably overdrafted compared to RJ Harvey, because I award 3 extra points to your marker system if you are a first-round pick, and I only award 1 extra point if you're a second-round pick. So Harvey grades out as a better prospect than CEH. So CEH really got vaulted by that draft capital in the first round, whereas Harvey, it's probably not predictable that he would have been a second-round pick, but it's also way more palatable to actually, say that he was a second-round pick versus Clyde being a first-round pick. So RJ Harvey absolutely is a better prospect, and he is definitely a better prospect than Clyde because one of Clyde's 7 markers is age. RJ Harvey isn't even hitting that. So Harvey's hitting on everything else that is all production. It's all athleticism. Even his Pro Football Focus markers are even better than that. He hits on all of the missed tackles forced and yards after contact and first down for rush attempts. It's all there for RJ Harvey. Maybe we were just as a community and as a consensus just not as in on RJ Harvey, and we should have been. And then Denver and Sean Payton are saying that we should have been in on him a lot more than we were. That could certainly be the case. And that's why I still have confidence in Harvey as my RB6. I understand why people want him higher. I can't do it whenever you have players like Quinshon Judkins and TreVeyon Henderson who grade out not too far right behind him, also got drafted at the very beginning of the second round, and they themselves also got phenomenal draft capital or landing spots, with TreVeyon going to New England and Judkins going to Cleveland. And obviously those are the next 2 guys on this list at 9 adjusted markers overall. So you can see just from a marker system standpoint, Clyde Edwards-Helaire was at 7 markers, like I said. That is comparable to DJ Giddens, who was a 5th-round pick. That is comparable to Devin Neal, who was a 6th-round pick. And you can get down in here as, Martinez and LaQuint Allen. Like, that was the range of player, Ollie Gordon. That's where Clyde Edwards-Helaire was before the NFL draft, essentially. It was in that kind of range, and these are all day 3 picks. So you can see how much higher Clyde got vaulted by that first-round draft capital than RJ Harvey, who's just sitting at, 8 markers. He was there with Judkins and TreVeyon and ahead of Caleb Johnson in terms of pre-draft markers hit. It's just, I think we just didn't really think that he was as good as we thought. Maybe we'll see. But yeah, Judkins and Henderson, love both those guys. They're 106, 107 for me in Superflex. I don't really think I need to talk all that much more about them. Caleb Johnson does grade out down in here, behind Bashaw Tootin even as the RB7 in the class. Then Scadaboo's right behind him as the RB8. I like Caleb Johnson a lot. Maybe that's a little bit of a Pittsburgh Steelers bias, but I do think that he just slides right into the Najee Harris role, and could even honestly be better than Najee Harris, especially if the offense actually does improve at any point over the next couple of years, or maybe even this year if they do get Aaron Rodgers or something like that, than what we've had to deal with Kenny Pickett and then, Justin Fields and Russell Wilson and stuff like that Najee has had to deal with. So if the offense gets better, Caleb Johnson should benefit from that, though I do think it's notable that he is grading out pretty significantly behind RJ Harvey, but then also well behind Judkins and Travion, despite the excellent landing spot, but still a third-round pick. Had he been a second-round pick, like the other guys, then he would be he'd still be behind Bashaw Tootin. So he would have gotten one extra adjusted marker, so he would have been at 6. So he still would be in the same spot had he went in the second round rather than the third round. So nothing's really changing there. Now, as for the rest of the class, Tootin and Scadaboo, I think, are great great picks in the mid to late second round is where I would like. I don't really want to reach for either one of them. I do think Scadaboo has immediate impact on the New York Giants and immediate impact on Tyrone Tracy. There is also upside that he could just take over that backfield, but I feel the same way about Bashaw Tootin. I think at worst he could be a handcuff. At best he could be this year's Bucky Irving, essentially as the RB1 for the Jacksonville Jaguars. And I think both of them are really good picks in the mid to late second. I don't want to put them higher because they are day 3 picks, and they could maybe still just not be super relevant. Like, we could just be wrong on them, and I don't want to vault them just because of landing spot because they were day 3 picks. But I still think that they're good in that mid to late second round area after a lot of the day 2 wide receivers. And obviously like Dart and everybody like that, the tight ends, some of them. That's where I would put Tootin and Scadaboo. Now, the rest of the class kind of got killed by either draft capital or landing spot. Like my boy Jarquez Hunter going to the Rams. Oh my gosh, we hate to see it so much. ETN is maybe the RB3, maybe the RB2 on the Panthers. I don't know if he's better than Rico Dowdle. He's certainly not any competition to Chuba, so don't be worried about that for Chuba, the fact that they drafted him in the 4th round. Taj Brooks could be interesting. He was just a 6th round pick, so that's actually worse draft capital than Chase Brown, but he fits in an offense and maybe even a role as the RB2 for Cincy. You could see it. DJ Giddens, I think, is a phenomenal handcuff to Jonathan Taylor. Dylan Sampson, I think, is a phenomenal handcuff to Quinshon Judkins. Woody Marks, I think, is a solid handcuff to Joe Mixon. Devin Neal, I think, is a great handcuff to Alvin Kamara. Handcuff. You want to talk about Jaden Blue, I think, is the one guy that... But what's funny about him is that he was a 5th rounder, so he's getting vaulted behind all these other guys, even though they have 4th and 5th round draft capital. But he wasn't all that great of a prospect anyway. But I am willing to take the shot on him in the early 3rd. I don't really want to reach for him in the 2nd. But if you're there at like 301, 302, and Jaden Blue's there, I'll take him because he has that upside to be the starter for the Dallas Cowboys. But just to kind of wrap up the running back class just in general, I really... I want to take shots on all of these handcuffs, essentially. Like, when you're in the 3rd and 4th rounds, I'm more looking to take a lot of these handcuff running backs just to see kind of what happens. And even though the draft capital wasn't necessarily there for a lot of these guys, they can still have an opportunity to be really just good handcuff running backs, like I said. If you're looking for specific targets, and we can go back to kind of these blue colorations that I have on here, so the PFF marker one is the easiest one. This is if you hit on any 4 of these very specific pro football focused metrics in career breakaway attempts, career yards after contact per attempt, best yards per route run, best first downs per route run, and you're drafted in the first 5 rounds, you get this blue color on you. The only 2 running backs in this class are Ashton Genty, of course, as if you need any more reason to draft him. But then it is Jarquez Hunter. That's why I was so in on Hunter before the NFL draft. Man, do I wish that he did not go to the LA Rams. I mean, maybe there's upside there. I'm still willing to take Jarquez Hunter because I just think that he's a good running back, but I behind Blake Corum and definitely behind Kyron Williams. I mean, maybe Kyron doesn't sign a contract, an extension. They let him walk, but I don't know. I'm still willing to take the shot on him just because it's nice to have handcuffs, and I'm willing to go, down to an RB3 on a team just for a handcuff in general. And this list certainly speaks for itself in terms of, we're looking at, it highlighted Bucky and Tyron Tracy from last year. It highlighted, Achane and Spears and Algier and, Antonio Gibson and Tony Pollard and, all these guys from the 2017 class. So obviously there's some big names, but there's also some really good names that fell in the NFL draft that were also then very valuable from a fantasy football perspective too, notably the two guys that we got last year. So I'm still willing to take the shot on Jarquez Hunter. I just think that the Rams landing spots just kind of soured my taste on him just a little bit, that I would prefer maybe guys, like DJ Giddens and Jaden Blue and Taj Brooks and Dylan Sampson and maybe even Devin Neal or something like that. Speaking of DJ Giddens, you get this blue coloration just on the marker column. If you hit on 7 or more markers and you were drafted in rounds 4 through 5, and then I have a BMI over 28 filter on there, which just filters out a couple of guys that were like really, really tiny. So essentially didn't have the frame to be an actual handcuff kind of guy that's going to take on a majority of the workload should the starter ahead of you get hurt. Like Donnell Pumphrey. Sorry, like you're amazing in college, but you don't have that translation into the NFL in terms of what the NFL is looking for. So that's why the BMI filter's on there. But if you're looking at a lot of these names, obviously a lot of these guys didn't pan out as well. You can look at what we were looking at with Ray Davis last year, and you got Izzy Abanikanda, Evan Hull. These guys didn't matter at all. Josh Kelly didn't matter. Brian Hill, Kenneth Dixon, Paul Perkins was fun if you played fantasy that long ago. But there are some really good names in terms of just good handcuffs, and there are even some other names that grew out of the handcuff role into actual annual starters, like Aaron Jones is on this list. Marlon Mack had a 1,000-yard season before they drafted Jonathan Taylor. Chuba is on this list. Algier had a 1,000-yard season as a rookie. Chase Brown is on this list. Jay Ajayi is on this list down in here. Darren Sproles, Michael Turner. Like, there are names on here that were either really, really good handcuffs and then gained kind of that solid value, or they even grew out of it to where they were actually, top 20, top 15, top 10 fantasy and dynasty running backs to a degree for maybe a year or two or more in dynasty. So the only 3 names in the 2025 class that were highlighted here are Tootin and Scadaboo, and then DJ Giddens. So that is why I'm also going to be in on DJ Giddens. I think he's probably every year I essentially have like an auto 3rd round pick. I don't really have that this year. Like, I was really in on Ray Davis last year. It was Chase Brown in 2023. It was Algier in 2022. Elijah Mitchell was my guy in 2021. So like, I've hit on some of these pretty solid names that DJ Giddens is going to be in that range for me. I don't want to say that he's my auto 3rd round pick, but he more than likely is going to be a guy that I'm looking to target in the 3rd round, especially if Tootin and Scadaboo, like I said, I'm taking them in the mid to late 2nd if they're even there. Just because Scadaboo probably won't be. Tootin might be there in the mid to late 2nd. And if you get Tootin in the 3rd, I would rather have Tootin than DJ Giddens. But assuming those guys are gone, you just have the opportunity to take a handcuff. I would take DJ Giddens in the 3rd, and then maybe you get Aronde Gadsden in the 4th, or another wide receiver that we're going to talk about here at a certain point. But I'll take Dylan Sampson. I'll take Taj Brooks. I'll take ETN. I'll take Devin Neal. I'll take Woody Marks. Just as many darts on all these guys, Jaden Blue. I'll take darts on all these guys, see what sticks, and if they don't work out, then you can just cut them. If they don't make the team by training camp, then you can just cut them. But I'd rather take a shot on a lot of these guys than a lot of other, wide receivers that we'll get to in a minute. Like, I'd rather take these guys than Savion Williams, for example, when you're down that late in your rookie drafts. And finally, we get to the wide receiver position. So again, here's the adjusted markers column that we are looking at. At the very top of it is, of course, Tet McMillan with 14 adjusted markers, and I will also throw Travis Hunter's name into there. He is at 11 adjusted markers, but he did not test, so had he hit on all 3 of those, it's the same 3 for Ashton Genty of 40 speed score and burst score, which, again, I'd imagine, because of how athletic he is, that he would have easily hit on all 3 of those markers. He is also then at 14 adjusted markers, tied for the wide receiver 1 in the class with Tet McMillan. And if you're curious in terms of where that puts him historically, these are the other wide receivers that have hit on 14 adjusted markers. You got Lamb and Jefferson from the 2020 class, AJ Brown is in there from 2019. Then you kind of get a little, we had a dark area with Kevin White and Will Fuller, but then Mike Evans, OBJ, Julio Jones down in here too. So again, some really, really big names with 14 adjusted markers. And if you're curious on maybe where it gets you with 13, that's where Odunze and BTJ were last year. That's where Ayuk was. That's where Allen Robinson was, Demaryius Thomas, Golden Tate, Michael Crabtree, Jordy Nelson, Greg Jennings. Those are some of the Andre Johnson. Those are some of the names that are basically in and around this range for Ted McMillan. Here's the 15s. 15s got a little dicey with Treylon, Sammy Watkins, but Cooks, Dez, Roddy, there's some names. It just shows you how much harder it is to hit on a wide receiver, even if they're as good as we maybe hope that they would be. Doesn't always translate over like it does necessarily for the running back position. But if you're going to take a bet on anybody, Ted McMillan and Travis Hunter are those two guys to go for. And I personally do prefer Travis Hunter over Ted McMillan, although I think the other one is a phenomenal consolation prize should you not draft or be able to draft the other wide receiver. So top two wide receivers easily for me. Luther Burden does come in still as the number 2 graded, technically number 3 graded wide receiver in this class behind Tet and Travis Hunter. This is a dilemma for me, honestly. It's something that I'm trying to find internally because I don't think that there really is another good comparison for what's going on with Luther Burden outside of, if you wanted to look at JSN or wanted to look at Rome Odunze. I think those guys are better comps for Emeka Egbuka because DJ Moore is old-ish, but he's still contractually signed there for another few years and is like 28, 29 or something like that. So it's not like, where JSN had 32 or 33-year-old Lockett and then another kind of middle-aged wide receiver. Odunze, same situation, had 32-year-old Keenan Allen on a 1-year deal and a middle-aged DJ Moore. Egbuka is kind of in that same boat. He's got a 32-year-old Mike Evans and then a middle-aged Chris Godwin. So that's why I think Egbuka fits the JSN Rome Odunze comparison a lot better. Burden, I just don't know what to make of it because there are so many mouths to feed, but he grades out just so well. I personally have him as my wide receiver, I believe 7 in this class. He is behind basically everybody that's on this, that I have highlighted on this list right here. In terms of my personal subjective rankings, that's where I have Luther Burden behind everybody on this list at the very bottom of the guys that I have highlighted. That could be very wrong. I understand that could be very, very wrong, that DJ Moore could be gone in a year or two. Maybe Burden is just better than Rome Odunze. Maybe Colson Loveland doesn't matter all that much. Maybe Burden is playing that like slot Amon-Ra role that Caleb Williams just is going to love to target, that Ben Johnson is going to love to scheme open. But I could also see the opposite way where Burden is not better than DJ Moore, and Moore is there for another 3 or 4 years. He's not better than Rome Odunze. Rome's there for another 3 or 4 years. Loveland is impactful just because he's playing every single snap and is also a good receiving tight end. And Burden is a guy that relies more on the manufactured touches rather than, route running and separation and all that. He relies more on his athleticism and being, schemed open rather than actually just going out there and getting open. He might fall down to being the 3rd or 4th option on this team. Who knows if they add another, running back next year? What if they draft Jeremiah Love next year? Now they have a very good running back who can also catch the ball. It's just, I see both sides of it for Luther Burden. I see why you can be bought in, but I also see the terrible downside that he just might not be somebody that we necessarily want to gravitate towards. If you want a comparison for that in terms of players that are in and around his range, I hate to go for Xavier Legette, but like Wandale's right there. Elijah Moore is right there. Corey Davis is right there. There's names in his range in terms of where he scored as a prospect that it just didn't work out at the NFL level. I could think of, I think Sky Moore is going to be right in here. Sky Moore's here at 13 markers, adjusted markers hit. Jalen Reagor is down in there. Andy Isabella. Like, it just didn't work for these guys. Nelson Aguilar just didn't work. And I am worried that Burden is just a better athlete than wide receiver. That's why I had him as my wide receiver 4 before the draft. So dropping him to wide receiver 7, especially whenever he is, like the sixth wide receiver, I think, off the board, maybe 5th wide receiver off the board. That it makes sense that I might prefer some of the other guys ahead of him as well, just given the fact of where I had him before the NFL draft too. and then you couple in the landing spot, the personal situation that he's got going on, all that subjectiveness that you can't really measure in a statistical analysis. That's the dilemma that goes on with Luther Burden inside my head. So I'm willing to draft him in kind of like that early-ish second. I don't know if he's still going to be there. Some people really could still be gravitating towards Burden and just say, screw the landing spot. I like the talent. A lot of people could be like me, be really concerned about the situation. Then he falls to like the 204, 205. And if that's the case, I'll grab him. But I don't know, man. Like I prefer Jaden Higgins. I prefer Trey Harris because I think they have immediate situations that we're going to know instantaneously, pretty much by the end of 2025, if those guys are actually good or not. I even, to a degree, I wouldn't fault you for, if you want a little bit of unknown, if you believed in Jalen Noel, to trade back from where you would be taking Luther Burden to get Jalen Noel, because I mean he might be better than Jaden Higgins. The Texans might have just drafted him around later than Jaden Higgins, but he might end up being the better wide receiver. That's totally within the range of outcomes, and he just has to climb the depth chart a little bit, just like Burden has to climb the depth chart a little bit. But like I feel like I gravitate more towards the players that we know that we're going to find out sooner whether or not they're actually going to be impactful for you. And I think they all have very similar ceilings. I think if Trey Harris hits as the X receiver for Justin Herbert, that's a phenomenal ceiling. If Jaden Higgins hits as the other outside wide receiver with Nico Collins getting passes thrown to by CJ Stroud, that's going to be another, very high ceiling type of situation. If Matthew Golden hits, obviously that's going to be a massive situation. If Kyle Williams, my wide receiver 4, graded out as my wide receiver 4, he could be the wide receiver 1 for Drake May. I've comped him to Stephon Diggs. That could be a massive situation. And I feel like, again, we just are going to find out sooner whether or not those guys could get to those ceilings or not. And yeah, maybe in 3 years, a couple of these guys, or maybe even all of these guys that I have ranked ahead of Luther Burden, are just not even worth anything. They all Jalen Reagor out. They all Denzel Mims out. They all, they just are out. Jonathan Mingo out. Terrace Marshall out of the NFL, out of Dynasty fantasy value. We don't care about them at all. That could be well within the range of outcomes. And then Burden, in 3-4 years, could still be trucking along. Maybe he's just Devontae Parker. Maybe he's Chris Godwin, who took 3 years to get there. Maybe he's Devontae Adams, who took 3 years to get there. Like, that is all well within the range of outcomes, but I'm going to know sooner on those other guys than I will Luther Burden, I think. And I think that's what I gravitate towards. So fully recognize that I could just be 100% wrong on grading or subjectively ranking Luther Burden well below where my marker system is telling me to rank him. But that's just what that's the dilemma. That's the kind of arguments that are going on inside of my head and the rationale behind some of the ranking for Luther Burden. So that's that. Obviously, I love Kyle Williams. If you watch my wide receiver rankings video, love the landing spot for Kyle Williams. Love the draft capital for Kyle Williams. If you want one extra positive for Kyle Williams, let me show you all these. So he's at 10 markers, right? That's where he was at before the NFL draft. That's where he's at after the NFL draft because he did not get the draft capital marker. You only get that if you're a first or second round wide receiver. He's a third round wide receiver, did not get that. For comparison, if you're looking at wide receivers that hit on 10 markers that were drafted in the third round, I'll do 10 or more. There's 10 or more. So it's either 10 or 11 markers, right? Jalen Tolbert, miss. Michael Gallup had a 1,000-yard season with the Dallas Cowboys. Chris Godwin is on there, big-time hit. Kenny Golladay, big-time hit. Those are essentially the last 5 players. Levante Carew sucks. He was supposed to be really good. Jalen Strong could have been good. Nate Burleson wasn't all that bad. I don't even know who Mike Walker is. But in terms of, these are the last 5 wide receivers that are hit on 10 or more of my markers, but drafted in the third round. So they did not get the draft capital marker. And 3 of them have 1,000 yards, at least one 1,000-yard season under their belt. And 2 of them had multiple 1,000-yard seasons. One of them's still going. So I love the situation for Kyle Williams. I love that he is graded out so well in my marker system. I'm drafting him all over the place in the early second round. He feels to me like this year's Rashee Rice. That's what I kind of compared him to in terms of how I feel about him post-draft compared to a lot of the consensus community. And I had a YouTube comment just before I even started recording this that was like, you lost me at Kyle Williams over Matthew Golden. And listen, man, again, I could stand by that in a year or two and be very, very wrong. But if I'm right, that guy's never returning to the channel to say, hey, good job, Addison. And I understand that's the position I'm in as a Dynasty and fantasy analyst, but I feel like I just want Kyle Williams. If you're looking at 2023, if I'd have told you to draft Rashee Rice over Jaden Reed, I feel like people might have been. If I'd have told you to draft Rashee Rice instead of Quentin Johnston, there's the comparison. That's the comparison to me. I was so totally out on Quentin Johnston, and I was so in on Rashee Rice. It's the same exact thing. That's the same exact comparison. Again, I can't use a sample of one to say that I have a 100% hit rate on that, but that's how it feels to me in terms of how much I love Kyle Williams compared to other wide receivers that were drafted ahead of him, or especially well ahead of him, like Matthew Golden. I'm not really going to talk through Matthew Golden all that much. You guys know how I feel about him. If you don't, watch my wide receiver rankings video or my first round reactions video or any other video that possibly could be talking about a rookie being overvalued. That's essentially where I'm at with Matthew Golden. I love Jaden Higgins. I love Trey Harris. They grade out pretty moderately well. I hate to see the Jalen Royals thing with him falling down into the Kansas City Chiefs, but that could be a situation where maybe they're building for post Hollywood Brown or post Rashee Rice. Jalen Noel, I think, is another, I talked about him a little bit. I think that he is a great, late second round pick. I don't love Alec. I don't love Jack Besh. That's one I'm really also combating a little bit too. I understand why people could be in on him, and he also didn't test. So I do have a burst score for him, I think. I do have a burst score. So I'm missing 2 markers for him for the 40 and the speed score. Had he hit on both of them, then he'd be up here with Royals and Noel, which I have him and Noel in the same tier anyway. So that's just me putting him where he should be. But I feel like a lot of people think that that's low by me saying that he is a late second round pick, and I would prefer Jalen Noel to him. I'm just not in on Jack Besh. He just doesn't hit on the production that I want to see. He's not Ladd McConkey. He's not Puka Nacua. He doesn't hit on a lot of PFF markers like the other 2 did. Nah, that's just kind of there. Bryant could be interesting. Tesla, I like the landing spot for the Lions. I think that he's a good fit for the Lions. Savion, I don't care about. Chimera DK, don't really care about. Jalen Lane could be interesting with the Commanders. Keandre Lambert-Smith is a really, really fun name. You guys should know it for the LA Chargers. Not saying that I would necessarily draft him, but you should know the name, Keandre Lambert-Smith. Then after that, Tez Johnson got dropped off of the McConkey list because he fell out of the top 200. Hate to see it. Ibuka was also on the McConkey list too, but then he got first-round draft capital, which vaulted him up too high. So the discrepancy between my markers and the PFF markers, which is what happens on the McConkey list. For those of you wondering, this is the McConkey list. Ibuka and Tez were on this before the draft, but then post-draft, they both fell off of it just based on the parameters of how the list is shakes out. So I love Ibuka. He's my wide receiver 3 in a tier of his own behind Tet and Luther Burden, so I love drafting him anyway. Now, the name that, if you were wondering on who the other player is that I alluded to, was the wide receiver that I think is a phenomenal, one of the 2 best late round players that you could draft in the 4th rounds or even 5th rounds with Rondé Gadsden, because I don't think anybody is really talking about him at all, is Torrey Horton. I highlighted Torrey Horton in a sleeper video back in February. I think I've highlighted him a couple times in maybe videos like this in my marker update videos. He lands with the Seattle Seahawks in the 5th round. You talk about Tyler Lockett 2.0, dude. He is fast. He has the production. He is phenomenal. Like when I was watching him, I initially comped him to Will Fuller, but he kind of had that like Tyler Lockett-ness going on to him. And I love the fact that he goes to the Seahawks. Wide open depth chart for him to climb, to be potentially, the wide receiver 3 off the rip ahead of Marquez Valdes-Scantling. I wouldn't even be shocked if he technically climbed over Cooper Kupp, especially given the fact of what Cooper Kupp was doing at the end of last year. Maybe he is dust. I said in my rookie wide receiver rankings video, when I kind of highlighted him at the end, that maybe he's this year's Jalen Coker, or maybe he's even more than that. Like Coker kind of got disintegrated by Ted McMillan being there. I still think could be like a good wide receiver 2 for that team, but I think Torrey Horton could maybe be this year's Jalen Coker that we're actually interested in, and we're maybe flexing for a few weeks in the regular season this year. But he also, I think, could maybe just be more than that. I'm not saying that he's this year's Puka or anything like that, but I think that he could be definitely more than his draft capital in the NFL draft and in Dynasty rookie drafts. So him, Oronde Gadsden, 4th round picks, book it, essentially. That's where we're at with both those guys. And then, in the 3rd round, I'm looking at Jaden Blue. I'm looking at DJ Giddens for sure, Dylan Sampson, all those other kind of handcuff running backs. Then when you get into the 4th, Torrey Horton, Oronde Gadsden. In the 5th, even, Torrey Horton and Oronde Gadsden. That's where we're at. Or you can take a quarterback. If you want to take Jalen Moreau or Will Howard or somebody like that in the 3rd, 4th, 5th, I'm not against that either. So that is the very long video of the post-draft marker update for all 4 positions, talking through my marker system, some guys that graded out really favorably, some guys that didn't necessarily grade out really favorably. The sun is perfectly right there and keeps going in my eyes every single time, and that is very annoying. So anyway, appreciate all of you guys. If you made it this far, congratulations to you. I wish I had an actual prize for you, but thank you so much because I greatly appreciate it, because I know if you made it this far that you are a true fan of the DLF YouTube channel. If you guys want and you're not already, you can join the DLF Discord, DLF YouTube Discord channel. The link is down in the description down below. We've had some pretty good conversations all weekend, just from the NFL draft, talking through some ADP. A lot of guys have been asking about what they should do with their picks, rookie picks, who should I draft, blah, blah, should I make these trades, all that kind of stuff. I'm in there. Other people are in there too that will also answer some questions. So if you just want a little bit extra of a community aspect to what goes on with the DLF YouTube channel, I would check out the YouTube Discord channel that is down in the description down below, especially if you made it this far. If you're not in there yet, seems like you're a pretty hardcore fan, and we'd love to have you in the Discord. So appreciate everybody for hanging out with me, and we will catch you guys in the next video. Have a fantastic rest of your day, rest of your week, and good luck in all of your rookie drafts. Peace.